Recent addition of Kevin O'Leary. This will be Mr. O'Leary's first debate as a candidate for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Let's listen in.
Here at the Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative Annual General Meeting. Please welcome to the stage Rob Batherson, your Conservative Party National Councillor for Nova Scotia.
How is everybody doing tonight? Remember October 2015? Remember when all our Liberal friends told us how wonderful it was going to be? We had 32 Liberal MPs in Atlantic Canada, 11 in Nova Scotia, 4 Liberal governments provincially. Question for everybody. How's that Liberal monopoly working for you? So I detect undecided. Think about it. With a Liberal government provincially and a Liberal government federally, the Justin Trudeau, Steve McNeil tag team has delivered an economy in Nova Scotia which has shed 13,300 full-time jobs in 2016. But you know what, folks? We're going to break that Liberal monopoly. We're going to break that Liberal monopoly. We're going to break it in 2017, starting with the election of Jamie Bailey as our next Premier. We're going to break it federally when one of these 14 people becomes our next leader and the next Prime Minister of Canada. And I don't know about you, I'm neutral. I love having 14 candidates. What a choice. I've even had friends suggest we share a few candidates with the NDP. You know, we have a surplus of supply. And what that tells you is the Conservative Party of Canada leadership is a prize worth winning, because our next leader will be the next Prime Minister of Canada and will get Canada back on track. But no matter how great these people are and how great our next leader will be, they're not going to be able to do it alone. And as your volunteer national councillor and our great staff organizer, Janet Friday-Dory, we can't do it by ourselves. We're going to need each and every one of you and many others in Sydney, Victoria, in Cape Breton-Canso, in Central Nova, in Cumberland, Colchester, in Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake, in Dartmouth, Cole Harbour, in Halifax West, South Shore, St. Margaret's, West Nova, and King's Hands. So that by 2019, under one of these individuals, we will deliver 11 Conservative members of Parliament from Nova Scotia with our next Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. A bit of history about this event. There are several mandatory debates from coast to coast that the Conservative Party of Canada has mandated each of these leadership candidates to attend. This one is not one of them. All 14 of these leadership candidates came because they care very deeply about Atlantic Canada. They care very deeply about Nova Scotia. They care very deeply about each and every one of you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, give a warm Nova Scotia welcome to the Honourable Aaron O'Toole. Welcome the Honorable Chris Alexander. Welcome Cape Breton native, the Honorable Lisa Wright. Welcome to the stage, Deepak O'Brien. Don't forget Pierre Lemieux. Welcome next, Rick Peterson. Andrew Scheer. Welcome to the stage, the Honorable Maxime Bernier. And right now, l'Honorable Stephen Blaney. Making his debut, welcome Kevin O'Leary. And next up, our friend, the Honorable Kelly Leach. Don't forget the Honorable Michael Chung. Next up, Andrew Saxton. And last but not least, number 14, Brad Truth. And now a familiar face to delegates to all Nova Scotians, your debate moderator for this evening, the Honorable Rob Moore, Conservative Shadow Cabinet Member for Atlantic Canada.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here this evening. It's a real honor to be part of this exciting event, to join the hundreds gathered here, those at home, and the next Prime Minister of Canada. I'm going to begin. A debate like this has to have some rules, so I'm going to begin by outlining the rules for tonight's debate. There will be 5 questions. Each question will emphasize issues important to us here in Atlantic Canada. Each question will be directed for first response at the candidate determined by a draw earlier this week. After the first response to questions 1, 3, and 5, we will then move across the stage from the audience's left to right, until each candidate has had an opportunity to answer. After the first response to questions 2 and 4, we will move across the stage from right to left until each candidate has had an opportunity to answer. All candidates have been asked to remain seated throughout the debate. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to answer each question. They will be shown a black signal when they have 15 seconds left and a red signal when their time has expired. After that time, their microphone, unfortunately, will have to be cut. In addition, each candidate will be allowed 3 opportunities during the question portion to provide an additional 30-second rebuttal. To indicate that they want to use one of their 3 rebuttal opportunities, the candidate will raise their blue paddle. The debate will wrap up with 90-second closing statements from each of the candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking forward to an informative and a spirited debate, and we're off to a good start. But I must ask you not to interrupt a candidate when they are speaking. And please, don't let your enthusiasm prevent other audience members from seeing or hearing what's happening here on stage. So without further ado, let's start the debate. The first question goes to Andrew Scheer, and the theme will be the economy. Nova Scotians are among the highest taxed people in Canada. The current Prime Minister says a carbon tax is needed to encourage people to innovate, to reduce carbon emissions, and grow the Canadian economy. What is your plan with respect to carbon pricing and the economy?
the first job of an Andrew Scheer government will be to repeal the carbon tax. Thank you. Every single time the Liberals are faced with a problem, their answer is a new tax. And you know what bothers me is how quickly the conversation around carbon taxing became about carbon pricing. When the market sets a price, it's based on supply and demand and cost of production, and you as consumers have a choice to pay it or not. When the government sets it, imposes it, and enforces its collection, it's a tax. It's not a price. It will kill jobs in Canada. It will hurt low-income Canadians. What Justin Trudeau and Gerald Butts wants to do is export the mess in Ontario to the rest of Canada.
Thank you. Maxime Bernier.
You know, I don't like taxes, and I don't like carbon tax. So for sure, under a Bernier government and a Conservative government of Canada, we won't have a carbon tax. I think it is hurting the economy. As you know, some provinces, they have a carbon tax, and it cannot solve the problem. So what we must do is to help the entrepreneur to invest in the economy for new technology. So we are, our emission, it's only 1.2% of carbon. So it is there, but we can do better, and with more innovation, more investment in the technology. So the best way to stimulate the economy is with private investment, and I have a plan for that. You can count on me. We won't have a carbon tax. Thank you.
Stephen Blaney.
Well, to repeat in a more colorful way, they say you can put the lipstick to a pig and it's still a pig. Well, you can add green to tax and it's still a tax. So no, there's no need to have such a tax in Canada, but we need to provide low-cost energy to our small businesses. That's why I'm promoting hydroelectricity, nuclear energy. There's some here in the Atlantic. And also, we need to lower taxes on our small and medium businesses because it's not government who creates jobs. We all know that. It's businesses, and we need to create this environment. On that, I agree with you, Maxime. No, we're all conservative after all. Thank you.
Kevin O'Leary.
We already have a shining example of why all this green initiative doesn't work on a tax basis. It's called the province of Ontario. $308 billion in deficit, much of it as a result of failed green policies. No carbon tax is necessary. Many people don't realize this. Canada has 1.2 billion acres of wetlands and forest. I'm an environmental studies student. What happens is these are carbon sinks. They absorb 2.1 to 2.6 tons of carbon a year. Canada actually absorbs 4 times more carbon than it emits. Canada is not the problem. What we have to do is simply provide goals for industries to achieve in terms of emissions and let them innovate. Leave the capital on their balance sheets, leave the capital on their income statements. Don't give money to government when it's unnecessary. We could shut down the entire economy of Canada and it wouldn't make a difference. We have to sell our technology to the Chinese and the Indians. That's how we'll solve emissions.
Kelly Leach.
So first, I'd like to welcome Kevin to the Conservative Party, and I'd like to welcome him back to Canada. Now, there's been some news stories recently about non-Conservatives joining the party to stop me becoming leader. I just never expected to be sitting beside one of them when I was running and sitting at this debate. Now, on the economy, we know what doesn't work. Justin Trudeau's plan. Bigger government, more rules, more regulations, more money to pay for it. Income taxes, payroll taxes, and now a carbon tax. As I said in May, I will abolish the carbon tax immediately on becoming Prime Minister. I have a budget plan, 6 points, focused on making sure our economy will be moving forward how it needs to. A balanced budget, reducing the deficits, making sure we control public sector benefits and pay. We need the private sector to grow and the government to shrink, and I'll be abolishing the carbon tax. Thank you.
Michael Chong.
Thanks. I think we need to get real about this issue. The fact of the matter is climate change is happening, and it's a serious threat. The last 16 of the last 17 years have been the hottest on record, and the last 3 years have been the hottest on record. And here's another reason why we have to get real about this. If we're going to take on Justin Trudeau in 2019 and win in Canada's cities, in British Columbia, and in many other regions of this country, we need to have a credible policy to reduce emissions. I'm the only candidate here on stage with a credible policy to reduce emissions that will both protect the economy and the environment. My plan is the only plan that has been reviewed and publicly praised by 4 university economists here in this country. It's also a plan that has the support of former Prime Minister Harper's former head of policy in the PMO, Mark Cameron. It's a real plan to reduce emissions that is based on the British Columbia model. It begins with one of the largest income tax cuts in Canadian history.
Andrew Saxton.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to be in Halifax tonight. Thank you for coming out, so many people. I think this is the biggest crowd we've had at one of these events, so thank you. It shows the spirit is alive here in Halifax. As Prime Minister of Canada, the first thing that I'm going to do is axe the tax. Because I tell you, the carbon tax is not going to reduce emissions. The only thing it's going to do is shift emissions south of the border to the United States and take tens of thousands of jobs with it. I will get on an airplane, I will fly to Washington, I will meet with President Trump for a harmonized solution to climate change. Because Canada can't go it alone. We have to have a North American solution to climate change. I will focus on creating jobs. In 2010 in Vancouver, we had the Own the Podium program, which brought home more gold. I'm going to make sure that we have an Own the Podium program for innovation and technology that's going to bring home jobs to the Maritimes. That's going to be my first plan as Prime Minister.
Brad Trost.
Let's be clear. A carbon tax is a tax on driving, it's a tax on heating, and it's a tax on lighting your homes. It's wrong. But not just a carbon tax, cap and trade, another form of the same thing, is wrong. Backdoor regulations is wrong. And I'm the only candidate who's not only opposed to carbon tax, I'm opposed to those other 2 forms of backdoor carbon taxing. Instead of spending money on climate change plans where we are literally planning on shipping $2.5 billion overseas out of Canada, we need to take that money and say to local Conservative candidates in the next election, you decide the local environmental initiatives that are important to you. Be it water in your constituency, be it cleaning up a mine, be it something like that. Taxes must go down. Taxes do not need to go up on anything, particularly not on heating and driving and lighting our homes.
Aaron O'Toole.
Thank you. I say often the problem with global climate change is not the single senior widowed person living in Timberley or Truro heating their home with home heating oil that will now pay more as a result of Justin Trudeau's tax. The problem is also not the small business that I toured in Fall River doing aerospace work, trying to compete against companies in Massachusetts that will not have a carbon tax. So this tax will not only kill jobs, it's making that single senior or the family struggling to pay bills pay for Justin Trudeau's plan. I oppose the carbon tax and always have. The difference is I don't just say that, I say what I'll do. I'll look at depreciation of all investments by large emitters in reducing their carbon footprint. I'll also, over a 10, 15, and 20-year plan, reduce their taxes if they can get their GHG emissions down. Conservatives lower taxes, we don't raise them.
Chris Alexander.
My policy would also be very simple. No federal carbon tax ever. There's no room for ambiguity on this. It's not just that it doesn't get the job done. It's not just that it raises the cost of everything and the cost of doing business in Canada, sending jobs in every sector elsewhere. It is a regressive tax that hits our most vulnerable populations, seniors, young people on low incomes, families struggling to make ends meet, Aboriginal communities hardest. And that is totally unfair and unjust. And it does the opposite for innovation to what this two-faced government in Ottawa is telling us. It will kill innovation. It will discourage energy producers in Canada from applying the technological solutions, the new processes, the Canadian way of having success in energy that
Lisa Raitt.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. First of all, I have to tell you that this moment right now, being home in Nova Scotia and seeing so many tartan scarves out there is worth being in this competition. So thank you so very much for welcoming me home, and I appreciate it. You know, I want to grow the economy. I know that you have to grow the economy to create the jobs. And there are two ways to do it. You can have low competitive taxation schemes, which is really important, so no carbon tax. And the other thing you need to have is sound fiscal circumstances. And Trudeau's government is taking us down a path that guarantees you there's not going to be a sound economy in 2019. Nova Scotia has punched above its weight in reducing emissions. And you did it without putting in a carbon tax, right? You did it. Because we get things done in Atlantic Canada. We get things done in Nova Scotia. We use our minds. We use our intellect. We'll do it again. No to the carbon tax.
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you. First, I want to make some clarification. The media today was saying that I was not going to be here. I want to assure you, I'm not a ghost. I'm the real Deepak O'Brien over here. But just let me say this. We are, as Kevin said, we are only 1.5% of emissions of global emissions around the world, a very minuscule. Therefore, carbon tax is not really a solution to Canada. And for my environmental policies, please go to my website, dpackage.com. Now, let me get back to the main thing, okay? Except for the liberals and the dippers, we all know that an economy, strong economy, is a balanced budget, a fair taxation system, and a regulatory regime that encourages investment and strong internal and external trade. So in my first 2 years in the government, I will reduce the expenditure by 2% while making sure jobs are not lost. To encourage investment, I will reduce the capital gains tax.
Pierre Lemieux.
Well, thank you everyone for being here.
Rob, I gave you money, man.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's really good to see such a warm and hospitable crowd here in Nova Scotia. And I want you to know that I am 100% opposed to a carbon tax. It will inflict financial pain and suffering on every single Canadian with no noticeable effect. A lot of pain with no gain. It will suck money out of the economy and therefore will lead to job losses. If you want to reinforce job creation, we need to lower taxes, and what will you do with your money? You will spend it in the economy and help create jobs. The carbon tax does the exact opposite. And I think we need to remember two important points. Canada's contribution to the world level of greenhouse gas emissions is less than 2%. The other thing is our Canadian companies and our employees are competing against the Americans. They will not have a carbon tax that will place us, our economy, and our jobs at a distinct disadvantage. We must kill the carbon tax.
Finally, Rick Peterson.
Rob, thank you everybody for being here. My wife Irish and I, coming from the West Coast, I grew up in Grand Prairie, and I just want to, Grand Prairie, Alberta. And on behalf of Alberta and Canada, I want to thank all of you for sending your sons, your daughters, your cousins, and your uncles, and your aunts for supporting the infrastructure and the oil and gas industry in Canada, which has been the lifeblood of Canada. There will be no carbon tax under Peterson as a Prime Minister, but what there will be is finally relief for you and your families, because out of all 14 people up here, I'm the only one with a plan to ease your tax load. Under my administration, everybody's federal income tax rate will be a 15% flat rate. Everybody who runs a small business here will have a 0% corporate tax. Create jobs, drive the economy, and let's get Atlantic Canada back on its feet, creating jobs and wealth that you all deserve here at home. Thank you.
Thank you all for your answers. And now for some rebuttals. The first is Aaron O'Toole, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. As I've said many times, I welcome all voices into this race, even people that used to be in other parties. So my question is for Mr. O'Leary. For many years, you supported the Trudeau-style carbon tax. Right up until the Vancouver Convention, you were on the record countless times supporting the carbon tax. I'm wondering when you changed your position on the carbon tax.
Next is Andrew Scheer.
In a recent interview, Kevin O'Leary said that while he opposed a carbon tax, his solution would be for anyone that didn't reduce emissions that they would go to jail. So I just want to put on the record right now that not only am I opposed to a carbon tax, but I am opposed to a carbon jail.
Stephen Blaney.
You know, I come from Lévis in front of Quebec, where we lost last Sunday 6 members of our community. And of course, I want to condemn all form of violence. But I also want to share something that is very Christian coming from a Muslim, from an imam. We must forgive, but we must not answer hatred. We must not answer hatred to hatred, but we have to clean our soul and watch our words that fuel hatred. I believe that as politicians, we have a moral responsibility to talk of those issues.
Michael Chong.
Thank you. I'm going to defend Kevin O'Leary here on his previous position on the carbon tax. A carbon tax is the most conservative way to reduce emissions. It is the most economically efficient way, the cheapest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There is no doubt about that. I don't support the Trudeau government's plan on this, but I do support the British Columbia model, which is a revenue-neutral carbon tax that's been used to introduce the deepest income tax cuts in their history that has allowed the economy to grow the fastest among all 10 Canadian provinces.
Thank you. Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you. I just want to finish where I was carrying on. So
You were rudely cut off, Deepak.
Capital gains 25% down, and for those earning over $500,000, the income tax will increase from 34 to 35%, and I'm sure my good old friend here, the reality star actor, wouldn't mind paying the extra few dollars for the health care. Thank you.
Rick Peterson. Rick Peterson.
I just want to let Michael know I'm from Vancouver, Michael, and I can tell you that the carbon tax there is not revenue neutral. If you are a 28-year-old welder working up on Site C up in Dawson Creek, you don't have SkyTrain, you don't have bike lanes, you got to drive to work in your truck. It's not neutral to you. And I can tell you that the provincial government there, it's such a good idea that they stopped it. They stopped increasing the escalating price that you have. It does not work. It does not work for BC. It will not work for Canada under my leadership as your Prime Minister. Thank you.
Andrew Saxton.
Mike's not on. There's Mike's on. My good friend Michael is very happy to say that he's got 4 economists that are supporting his economic plan. If I had 4 economists supporting my economic plan, I'd go back to the drawing board and rewrite it. I mean, when was the last time you saw a wealthy economist? I mean, really, they're in their ivory towers, sipping tea and coffee and talking about theory, not practice. The carbon tax doesn't work.
Chris Alexander.
Not to finish this part of the debate, this question, without reminding ourselves as Conservatives how important it is for us not only to stand against carbon tax, but to stand in favor of increasing Canada's low-cost energy output in every field. We need to build Energy East. We need to expand production of oil and gas in Nova Scotia, in and off Nova Scotia, in and off Newfoundland and Labrador. And we need to become a low-cost producer in every field.
Thank you. That concludes question 1. The second theme is justice, and Stephen Blaney will be the first to respond. Late last year, a judge in Ontario struck down a mandatory 1-year jail sentence for a perpetrator found guilty of sexual interference of a 15-year-old girl. Here in Nova Scotia, a young man was acquitted of sexual assault because he believed the sleeping victim had given consent. Do you feel the laws and penalties around sexual assault are adequate? If not, how would you change them? Stephen Blaney.
Your questions are very easy. You know, they're totally inadequate. Why? Because we need to get back to what we've done for 10 years. It's fairly simple. The Vic Dave, the Peter MacKay, the Rob Nicholson did it under Stephen Harper. It's put victims first. That's that simple. I co-sign, thank you. It's very simple. I co-sign the Victim Charter of Right. This is an important piece of legislation, but we still need to stop the revolving doors. We need sometimes to tell the Supreme Court, you're wrong. You know, 1 + 1, we have a count in here, it makes 2. You don't double your time before you get your sentence. We need to have more judges. You know this Jordan case, it's absurd that you are under investigation and you get a free pass because the time is out. It's just like, no, my time is not out. So look, I want to make one pledge today. No cause shall be unheard and trial aborted because of the ineffectiveness of the current justice system that arms the victims once again. They've been armed once.
Maxime Bernier.
I'm very proud what we did under the Harper government. I think that was the right thing to do for Canadians and for the security of this country. What is the most important, we must have judges at the Supreme Court who will respect the sovereignty of the Parliament. And the judges are not there to make laws, they are there to interpret legislation. And I want to be sure that the next judge at the Supreme Court will be a judge that will interpret the Constitution and not making laws. I think that's very important. Thank you.
Andrew Scheer.
You know, as a father of 5 children, nothing infuriates me more than watching a news item warning me as a parent that the state has allowed a repeat sexual offender back into my community and I should be on guard. I don't think I should have to be on guard as a parent. I think that offender should be under guard in prison. The left likes to talk about justice issues and they like to talk about how they're full of compassion, but their compassion is always for the criminal. I want a justice system that is compassionate for law-abiding men and women and families and the children that they're raising and have a duty to protect.
Rick Peterson.
I'm the son of an RCMP officer, and I have 2 gorgeous daughters. So I think you can understand how I would feel and how I understand anybody else would feel in the case that's been brought up. So I want to draw attention, though, to the bottom end of the justice system, and that's our frontline officers, the men and women who answer the calls, go to the houses, are trying to produce evidence. I commit as Prime Minister to reinforce and to upgrade the arms and the ability that our frontline RCMP officers have. I'm going to tell you that under my leadership, we are going to be recruiting the best and the brightest. Under my leadership, the RCMP will take a new and unblemished role of defending our laws and defending our justice system. Let's help the men and women at the cutting edge of the knife. Let's help the men and women who are out there risking their lives every day for you and I. As their leader, as their Prime Minister, I've got their backs. Thank you.
Pierre Lemieux.
Thank you. I think you're going to find there's a lot of similarity between each of us as candidates in terms of wanting to fight crime and wanting to support victims. But one issue that we really need to highlight and that I've highlighted as a candidate is my concern, and I think your concern, with the Supreme Court and its encroachment on Parliament. And in recent decades, it's been the Supreme Court judges who have decided the most controversial questions, not voters and not Parliament. The most recent being euthanasia. Supreme Court judges have made the law in Canada, and in this case, they did not just simply strike down the euthanasia law. Their ruling was so prescriptive in telling Parliament what they could and could not do that they were indeed making the law. And the Supreme Court is not equipped to do this. So think of Parliament and the legislative process. First reading, second reading, committee, third reading, and then it goes into the Senate. And at each of those stages, you as Canadians have an influence over the formation of that law. At all steps, you have input. None of this happens with the Supreme Court. It simply is overruling Parliament and you, the Canadians.
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you. We must ensure our law enforcement officers have the funds and the legal framework to keep Canada safe. Punishment must fit the crime. Victim right must be strengthened. Our justice must not be burdened by delays, because justice delayed is justice denied. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this, and I've said this on many, many occasions. You know, our country is a different country. Sharia law, as I have stated, has no place in this country. So let's forget that debate. Close it. You know, it's not important. Let's get on to the most important issue. The threat is homegrown terrorism, either be it Islamic radicalization or be white supremacists. Let's get on to make sure our society is a harmonized society. Thank you.
Lisa Raitt.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. I went to school in the 1990s, law school, and it was at that time when we really did toughen up the laws around sexual assault. But if you happen to read an article in the newspaper today, there's something very troubling that's happening with reports of sexual assault, and it's the propensity of law officials to name them as being unfounded in the complaints. Now, I think what we need to do is have a hard look at this. If the girls are coming forward and talking about an assault that happened to them, then we need to make sure that our frontline have the best training there is so that they can understand the frailties of the victim that they're dealing with. And that training has to be at the front line. It has to be with the Crown Prosecutor. It has to be with the judges. It should be mandatory. If these girls are coming forward from one of the universities, and I have to tell you, read the article, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia have terrible rankings. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. You have to measure these unfounded calls in our police forces and help them get better training so that girls, when they come forward.
Chris Alexander.
I agree with Lisa. It is a crisis, and the insight, the investigation we had today from one Canadian newspaper about these unfounded cases, 1 in 5 victims is being sent home told that they don't know what they're talking about. That is unacceptable. We've all, many of us, heard about these stories, met these victims. We must change the situation. I am the father of 2 daughters, 1 7, 1 5, and the issue is not just within our borders. We are raising children in this country. We are trying to be strong in a world where ISIS is dealing out brutality, especially against women, every day. In a world where Russia has just made domestic violence legal. We need to stand for what is right. And we stand for prevention. We stand with victims. We need a prime minister that cares about these things. We need a justice system that provides access, that is swift, and that keeps repeat offenders off the streets.
Aaron O'Toole.
Thank you. The question was on mandatory minimums for sexual assaults, and we've heard a lot of my friends here talk about the Supreme Court and a whole range of other issues. I've consistently, for the last year and a half, said mandatory minimums are required for violent crimes, for kidnapping, and for sexual assaults. That's where our society sends a signal that public safety of our people comes first. Under Conservatives, victims come first, and they did under the Harper government. And I'll use an example. Peter MacKay did incredible work updating our criminal code after the Rehtaeh Parsons case here in Nova Scotia. We tackled cyberbullying because the criminal code did not anticipate that people could be harassed and even harmed online. Conservatives listened and changed the law to protect victims. That's how I will act as Prime Minister. Safe communities, victims first, tough on violent sexual offenders.
Brad Trost.
My friend Aaron was right. The question was about mandatory minimum sentences, something that we passed consistently under the previous Conservative government. The problem is judges strike it down. And we've heard a lot of talk here about replacing judges, about doing other things, but there's something in the Canadian Constitution known as the Notwithstanding Clause that progressive Conservative premiers fought for in 1982. And what it really says is the buck stops with Parliament. And if we want those mandatory minimums, we can use what's known as the Notwithstanding Clause. We can pass that legislation again, and we can actually have it implemented in law, even if leftist judges overturn it. If you think a law is moral as Prime Minister of Canada the first time, you should be prepared to stand behind it all the way till you meet your voters. That means a Brad Trost government will back its justice legislation with the Notwithstanding Clause every time.
Andrew Saxton.
Thank you. The number one responsibility of a government is to ensure the safety of its citizens. Many people in Canada don't think we have a justice system because not everybody gets justice. We have to put the rights of victims ahead of the rights of criminals. When it comes to sexual interference, especially with minors, this is a terrible crime. You're ruining people's lives, and the punishment should fit the crime. It also reminds me of that story of that poor woman in Montreal who had acid thrown in her face melted. The person who did that to her is out walking the streets after a short time. She has to live with those scars for the rest of her life. We need a justice system that is truly a justice system, and as Prime Minister of Canada, I will make sure that we have one.
Michael Chong.
Thanks, Rob. I support mandatory minimum sentences for violent crimes. I support the punishment and deterrent nature of our criminal justice system. My wife and I have 3 young children, William, Alistair, and Cameron. They're in grades 7, 4, and 2, and nothing is more important to us as parents than their safety and security. But where I disagree with the previous Harper government is I think we need to also put an equal emphasis on rehabilitation. I'm a Christian, I believe in redemption, and I also believe that the people who enter our prison system need to also be rehabilitated. The fact of the matter is that on any given day in Canada, there are some 16 or 17,000 federal inmates in our federal penitentiary system, but there are some 3 million Canadians who at one point of their lives made a mistake and committed a criminal offense. We have to understand that the vast majority of people who commit criminal offenses enter our society, and we have to ensure that rehabilitation programs are in place so that once they've discharged their debt to society, they can become, once again, productive members.
Kelly Leach.
The safety of our communities is paramount in importance for Canadians. It's because of this safe and prosperous nation individuals choose to come here every single day. I care about the safety of Canadians, and I support mandatory minimums. In our country, though, too many women are victims of physical and sexual assaults. I've talked about and proposed changing the legislation around making sure that pepper spray and mace are available for women for self-defense. When I become Prime Minister, I will change the law. I want to make sure that women don't go to jail because they were defending themselves. Now, on my proposal, only one individual has made a comment. Maxime Bernier made fun of this issue. Maxime is wrong. Protecting women from physical and sexual assaults is extremely serious matter. As Prime Minister, I will work to eliminate violence against women and girls and change the law.
Kevin O'Leary.
You know, I travel the world as an investor, and I go to some of the harshest places on earth in doing so. I wish I could take everybody with me here to go some of these countries where law is just a concept. I have a very hard time criticizing our justice system or the men and women that enforce it in this country, when every time I come home, I want to get off the plane and kiss the ground here. This is an extraordinary country. We're the luckiest people on earth. What we enjoy in freedoms, what we have in inclusive societies we've got, and the system that actually supports us, the men and women that enforce it, you have to come with me and see what the other side looks like. It's brutal. We are lucky, lucky, lucky. I can't criticize. I'm sorry. We're lucky.
Thank you. And now we'll move to the rebuttal phase, and first is Lisa Raitt.
There I am. Two of the people on the panel said to me that the question I answered was wrong, that I should have talked about mandatory minimums. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to talk about stuff that is topical, and I will make it a promise here right now. After reading what I read in the Globe and Mail about the propensity of unfounded reports going in from police officers, I call upon this Trudeau government today to ensure that in their budget, they have money to make sure that these people have the appropriate training so we don't send our daughters to places where they can't get justice.
Brad Trost.
Mike had a really good point about how important rehabilitation is. We don't want people going back and reoffending. But I remember what a Mennonite pastor told me about one of the most effective ways to prevent people from reoffending. Make sure they have their own cells so they aren't forced to join gangs. We need to have adequate number of prison cells for the prisoners, not just to keep them in there, but to keep them from going back. So when they're in there, they don't have to join gangs. It's an important part of our infrastructure.
Maxime Bernier.
I just want to say that it's clear that I'm for mandatory minimum sentence when we need it. And also, we need to have rehabilitation, and we need to put more resources in rehabilitation. So I'm very proud to be Canadian, and as you know, I was Foreign Affairs Minister. I travel across the world, and yes, we have a great system, judiciary system, but that's a great country because of you, because of people like you. All together, we can do something great for this country.
Chris Alexander.
I've lived in some of those countries where there is no rule of law. And yes, I am proud when I see Canada rated the best place in the world, the best country in the world in which to be a woman or girl. But there is no room for complacency on these issues. We have a long way to go. There is still a culture of sexual harassment, well documented, in the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces. There is a problem on campus. There is a problem of forced marriage around the world and inside this country. We need to stand up for women and girls.
Andrew Scheer.
I've only ever lived in Canada. I haven't traveled. I don't take $1 million vacations in the Bahamas. I took my wife to Moose Jaw for our honeymoon. But I don't think that we should compare ourselves to countries with no rule of law and say that we can't do better. We're not lucky to live in a country where repeat offenders are let out to terrorize our children.
That concludes question 2. We'll move on to question 3. Our third theme is healthcare. Mr. O'Brien will be the first to respond. Healthcare spending in Nova Scotia represents approximately 40% of government spending. Awareness of mental illness has been growing in Nova Scotia, along with a significant increase in people attempting to access mental health care. Government spending regularly exceeds planned spending. What is your plan to address mental health in federal health care transfers, and would this be a priority?
Thank you, Rob. Healthcare in Canada is a shared responsibility with the provinces according to the Constitution and is a pillar of Canadian identity. I will always respect healthcare initiatives that are beneficial to elderly care, improving mental health, alternative medicine, home care delivery, or compassion for terminal ill, as well as advocating the best practices in the healthcare system. However, I feel we need to create a national agency to standardize qualifications, certifications, and code of conduct for evidence-based medical professions. This will help reduce unnecessary costs and fast-track qualified professionals to fill the gaps across the country. We must also address accessibility to affordable drugs, and I think because of our aging population, we must take a very bold step. Let's have a dialogue on pharmacare. Thank you.
Pierre Lemieux.
Thank you. I think once again you're going to hear a lot of similarity in response. So for me, one of the greatest threats to our healthcare system is the legalization of euthanasia and assisted suicide. And I think sometimes we get very comfortable with those words of euthanasia and assisted suicide, and we can overlook what's really going on. For the first time ever, the patient can say to the medical system or to their doctor, "Kill me." And this is a seismic shift in our healthcare system. People do not want to die in pain, and they certainly don't want their loved ones to die in pain, which is why, as Prime Minister, I would prioritize palliative care, which absolutely excels at the managing and alleviating of end-of-life pain so that people are comfortable, so that people do not need to choose euthanasia or assisted suicide. The other thing to realize, too, is that euthanasia and assisted suicide is going to cost a lot less than palliative care. So unless you have a leader that actually prioritizes palliative care and says, I will put tremendous funding into palliative care and pain management research, then euthanasia will become the least expensive option.
Rick Peterson.
This is my favorite topic. Among everybody here up at the stage, I'm the only one that works day to day inside with entrepreneurs in Canada. And what our healthcare needs is more private sector approach, private sector ideas, private sector presence. Going to give you a heads up on Tuesday of next week, February 12th. You're going to see a detailed proposal that's going to give the provinces more say under my leadership as Prime Minister. You're going to find that Dr. Brian Day who is leading a Supreme Court challenge in British Columbia, is going to come out and support my plan, my approach. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear here. All of us, I'm 62, I think there's a few of you a little older, a little younger than me, tremendous pressure on the healthcare system. You will pay. You will pay. Your health will pay. Your family will pay unless we have innovation, unless we have more choice, unless we have health insurance that is more attuned to the needs of everybody out there. We're going to get hurt. Under my leadership, that will stop. We're going to turn the corner and we'll get real solutions.
Andrew Scheer.
Well, with respect to mental health, absolutely, the federal government can play a leadership role with the provinces in first tearing down the stigma around mental health. And I'd like to salute all of those on stage here and all of you in the room who took part in the Bell Let's Talk Day. That was a huge initiative, I think, an important step to get people talking about those issues. But more than just talk, we do need action. And I endorse the Kirby Commission report. I'm very proud to have the support of my colleague, Senator Denise Batters, who has really championed mental health issues. I want to build on what the previous Conservative government did to help our veterans with mental health issues who have come back from putting their lives on the line around the world. The federal government has a responsibility to those veterans, and as Prime Minister, I will make that a priority.
Maxime Bernier.
Canada has the worst wait times for surgery in the developed countries. We are the country who spend the most for healthcare in the OECD countries. So we must do something, but also healthcare, it's a 100% a provincial jurisdiction. So what we can do, in line with respecting our Constitution, instead of taxing Canadian and giving that to provinces, what we must do, we must lower taxes at the federal level and transfer tax points to provinces. Like that, they will be responsible, accountable before their population, and they will have the right incentive for having a universal mixed system, mixed healthcare system with private delivery and public delivery of services, but not like the US, like in Europe, like in Japan, like in Australia. So we can fix it, we can give the right incentive to provinces to do it. That is the solution and the right solution.
Stephen Blaney.
Yes, thank you. So Rob, when I was public safety minister, police officers would tell me that most of the time they would encounter mental illness cases. So that's why we develop HUB, multidisciplinary team. So we don't necessarily need to have more money in that area, but rearrange the way we are dealing with mental issues. We find it also in our prison as well. Now that's an issue. Under the Harper government, we transfer massive amount to provinces in a partnership way. Now we have Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is my way or the highway. It's Ottawa's knows best. I agree with Maxime that we need to respect provinces who have their jurisdiction and also to empower them to explore innovative and more efficient way to provide health care. Thank you.
Kevin O'Leary.
Actually, the problem with healthcare as it's constructed now in Canada has a lot to do with the economy. You saw recently the squabbles on transfer taxes because what's really occurring is Canada does not work at 0.7% GDP growth. The system does work at 3%. We have to find a way to get everything working, not just for healthcare, for education, for military, and for our social net. The bottom line, the reason we have these long wait times for cataract and hip replacement surgeries, et cetera, is because the cupboard is bare. You can't make it work. Whether you transfer or whatever structure you want will not work unless we get growth back to 3%. That is the core problem. Now, we have a Health Act here that puts it back to the provinces, but the transfer payments are really what the debate is about. You saw how contentious that was just a few weeks ago. That's because the economy is not growing. This problem will not go away. It's only going to get worse, and wait times will even extend. Have to get to 3%. That's the primary mandate of anybody up here on this podium.
Kelly Leach.
Well, as a practicing physician and surgeon, I have a bit of a different perspective than I think others sitting at this table. And I've been in operating rooms, and I've focused on health innovation. And there are real problems. And anyone out there that says to you that there are simple solutions to this, that it's just about when you show up with your Visa card at the emergency department, they're just simply not telling you the truth. My focus will be different. My focus is not on the bickering between the provinces and the federal government, but quite frankly, on a focus on the patient, making sure that your loved one gets access to the mental health services they need. Because the system should be serving you, making sure that you and your family members get what you deserve. You deserve timely access to care, high quality care, and we're not just going to achieve that by showing up with a bigger bank card.
Michael Chong.
Thanks, Rob. I think the question was about whether federal government should compel provinces to deliver mental health care services in a certain way. And my view is that the federal government should not put conditions on federal transfers to the provinces for allocations to specific forms of healthcare delivery. You know, we have a future premier in here, Jamie Bailey, and we certainly don't want to tie his hands as the premier of this province in delivering public health care services for Nova Scotians. So I think the federal role is to ensure long-term sustainable transfers for health care for each province. The previous government took that approach. Over the 10-year period from 2006 to 2016, federal healthcare transfers grew at an annualized compounded rate of about 5.7% per annum. That's a healthy rate of increase, a predictable rate of increase that allowed provinces to plan out for the delivery of their healthcare systems.
Andrew Saxton.
A few years ago, I rushed my mother to the emergency of our local hospital, and we were told to wait. And over the next 3 hours, we waited, and I watched my mother have a stroke in the waiting room of that hospital. I don't want anybody in this room to go through that experience that I went through. I don't believe that throwing money at the problem is necessarily the solution. We spend more on healthcare than just about any other country, but we're number 17 when it comes to receiving services. We have to find a more efficient and effective way of delivering healthcare to Canadians. And that might mean that we might have to look at the private delivery of healthcare in Canada, because I think Canada is one of the 3 last countries, along with Cuba and North Korea, that only has one delivery system of healthcare. We need a more efficient system, and as Prime Minister, I'll make sure that we have a healthcare system that works for all Canadians.
Brad Trost.
The question was about mental health and prioritize it. And I think each and every one of us here wants to prioritize it. A lot of us up here were good personal friends with a member of Parliament who had some real struggles with it that did not end well. So we want to prioritize it. But how do we decide it's a more greater priority than things like old age homes, waiting lists? I have to admit, I don't think the federal government in Ottawa should tell the provinces exactly how to do it, because different provinces have different problems. I really hope mental health care is one of the top, because I have a personal interest in it. But what this comes down to is we need to change the system. We need to give the provinces flexibility. We need to make sure all Canadians are covered and they can have health care from coast to coast. We give them that flexibility there, and we need to give the provinces the ability to solve these problems with adequate funding.
Aaron O'Toole.
Thank you. One of the proudest days I had as Minister of Veterans Affairs was in Halifax when I announced the new Operational Stress Injury Clinic here in Halifax. Why that was special? The men and women of the Navy and the Air Force will be served by this, and I served with the Navy and the Sea King Squadron here in Nova Scotia, where I met my wife, Rebecca. So being here was very special to make sure we're taking care of those needs. We also announced support for service dogs, and some of the advocates, Medrick Cousineau here in Eastern Passage, has been a leader nationally on that. And I know Jamie Bailey, Carla McFarlane, and others are working on veteran mental health in particular. My worry is the 2-tier healthcare system that's emerging in Canada. Atlantic Canada versus the rest of Canada, especially urban Canada. With the shrinking population and demographic challenges, the federal government has to find a way to help particularly rural parts of Nova Scotia. My plan, I announced doubling the expense credit, tax credit for people in rural areas, incentivizing healthcare professionals to come here.
Chris Alexander.
We tend to give answers with regard to the mental health challenge, the mental health crisis, that involve bringing government together or asking the provinces to do more or thinking about other priorities. We need to accept that this is an overriding new priority, that this is an area that needs to be addressed urgently, because there are too many people suffering from mental health problems in our correction system who wouldn't have offended if they had been treated properly. There are too many people who are homeless, not because they can't find a place to live, but because of mental health issues. It's a continuing issue in the Canadian Forces, and it needs to be addressed as a priority. I would make this a priority as Prime Minister, to measure results, to expect results, to make sure that Canada multiplies the number of healthcare professionals on the front lines tomorrow.
Lisa Raitt.
Thank you very much, Rob. When I was Minister of Labour, myself, Leona Glucock, and Diane Finley banded together to ensure that we gave a little bit of money, $32,000, to make sure that we'd have a standard for workplace safety, for workplace mental health. And it has grown into Bell Canada Let's Talk. It has grown into a first aid kit. The work that we did at the Mental Health Commission of Canada is amazing. We can get caught up talking about how much money is going to go to what province and what strings are going to be attached, but I can tell you this. I know for a fact that a Prime Minister who tells their ministers of justice, of health, of labour, of human resources, of defence, of Veterans Affairs, of transportation, that we are going to actually value mental health in the workplace, and we're going to work together to ensure that there's no stigma and that we do better as a society, you will see huge gains in dealing with this issue. And it's not just about transfer funds.
Thank you. Now on to rebuttals. First, Rick Peterson.
Kevin O'Leary says that it's the economy, but he doesn't have a plan. He's got a guitar, but I haven't seen a plan yet. And go to petersonleader.ca, and you'll see a clear plan to cut corporate income tax to 0, your personal federal tax to 15, and grow the economy and grow the whole economy so that healthcare counts. Michael Chong wants to increase some spending. Chris Alexander is going to increase some spending. How are you going to do it? You got to grow the economy. It's the economy, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be a driver of your healthcare solutions. I have a plan. petersonleader.ca. Let's get real about how we're going to get out of this. Thank you.
Brad Trost.
As Conservatives, we all agree that the provinces have the primary role in healthcare, and we don't want to tie the hands of the new Premier here, soon-to-be new Premier. But there are practical things the federal government can do. Changing and helping immigration laws so we can get doctors into rural areas. Nova Scotia is probably like a lot of the rest of the country. There's probably a shortage of doctors in some parts of the country. We can help the provinces by adjusting immigration rules and laws to encourage foreign doctors to settle in areas that need them.
Aaron O'Toole.
Thank you. Just days before coming to the large gathering here of Tories in Nova Scotia, Maxime Bernier announced his plan on equalization. He wants to phase out equalization. What he also said tonight about tax points and the transfer for maritime provinces with economies in challenge and demographic challenges, ending equalization, transfer tax points will hollow out services for Atlantic Canadians. As Prime Minister, I will not allow that to happen. Thank you.
Pierre Lemieux.
Can you hear me? Yes, thank you very much. I mentioned euthanasia earlier this evening, and on behalf of medical health practitioners, I want you to know that as a leader and future Prime Minister, I'm a very strong advocate for conscience legislation to protect our medical practitioners who have deeply held convictions regarding euthanasia and assisted suicide. They should not be forced to participate in this process if it is against their deeply held convictions, and the only way to protect them is with conscience legislation. Thank you.
Andrew Saxton.
Yes, I also heard that Maxime wants to reduce equalization. Well, I can tell you that equalization is not the problem in the eastern provinces. The problem are Liberal governments that have caused these problems in the Maritimes. We need to get good Conservative governments elected here, and Mr. Bailey needs to get elected, so please help him in the next election. I can tell you the economy will be the #1 issue in the next election. I'm the only candidate who has significant financial experience in both the private sector over 30 years, as well as in government. I was Jim Flair.
Maxime Bernier.
Yes, I want to review the equalization formula because it's not good for you. It's not good for Quebecers also. I don't want to punish you if you want to develop your natural resources. I don't want to punish you if you want to lower your taxes at the provincial level. We need to have an equalization formula that would be fair for every Canadian, and that will give an incentive to the province, to every province across the country, to develop their natural resources. And so that's why, yes, I want to do that, because I know it will be good for every region of this country.
Aaron O'Toole.
So, Maxime, when the tax base here is shrinking, so there's less tax points to transfer, and you're going to end equalization, aren't you basically saying to Atlantic Canada that you're going to have two-tier health care because the federal government will no longer make sure there's equal access? That's what equalization is, friends. We make sure that the Canadian family all benefit from our programs. Sometimes these simple responses to issues need to be explained, Maxime. I think you owe it to this crowd to explain it.
Michael Chong.
Thank you, Rob. Maxime, I like a lot of the ideas that you're proposing in this race, but there's one idea that I think will be an electoral devastation for us, and that's your proposal to scrap the Canada Health Act and to remove the federal government entirely from the delivery of public health care in this country. The vast majority of Canadians believe in our public Medicare system, and they don't want to see the federal government's role scrapped. They don't want to see the Canada Health Act scrapped, and I think that would be a big problem for us in the next election.
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you, Maxine. Equalization issue. In this country of ours, we have provinces which are growing at a different rate. Some provinces have resources, their income is higher than the other provinces. And so you could have a living of standard which is very different. Equalization provides that all Canadians have a standard which is equal across the country. That is the strength of equalization. That is why we need equalization. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin O'Leary will be the first to answer the next question. The theme is jobs. Nova Scotia is approaching a crisis. The province has faced prolonged, slow economic growth coupled with an aging and shrinking population. This is indicative of economies across Atlantic Canada. Given the serious demographic challenges and weak performance across the economy, what is your plan to support and grow Nova Scotia's economy and create jobs?
It's the role of government to provide a rich soil under which any entrepreneur, large or small business, can plant the seed and flourish as the business grows. That is the basic premise and mandate upon which any government should form. You can't even grow a weed here anymore. These policies put by your own Liberal leadership, it's a disaster. The whole idea is to be competitive so that capital from all around the world that wants to develop opportunities, particularly in resources in Atlantic Canada, has the opportunity to do so. The capital is fluid. It goes to the place of least resistance and highest opportunity. Corporate taxes are insane in Atlantic Canada. They've got to come down. All the regulation here is punitive to job growth. It makes no sense. You know, when I'm Prime Minister, what I'm going to do is provide a form of economic therapy motivation to any province that doesn't get online. Ask Kathleen Wynne how it's going.
Stephen Blaney.
Well, I agree with Erin O'Toole that every part of the country needs a different approach. And we need a special approach for Atlantic. And you know what is the real issue here that makes Nova Scotia lose $1.2 billion a year? The blood of Nova Scotia. It's youth. It's out-migration. That's what we need as a federal government to work in partnership with provinces to find solution with a plan to keep our youth here with university, with the shipyard, with clean energy, with farmers, with supply management, okay? You heard that? Yes, we have great farms right here up north of Halifax, providing milk to Nova Scotians. So that's what we need. We need to work together in a respectful manner. This is a federation. This is not a dictatorship. We work with provinces and we find out solutions that are adapted to every region of this country. Thank you.
Maxime Bernier.
I don't have a special plan to grow the economy here. I don't have a special plan to grow the economy in my own province, but I have a plan to grow the economy all across this country. I want to lower taxes for every single Canadian. I want to lower taxes for every single entrepreneur. I want to cut corporate welfare, and I want capital back. I want jobs back. I want people back. And it's already working. Kevin is with us today. So the most important is to believe in people and to believe in the entrepreneur. We have a plan. We want to abolish capital gains tax. I want you to keep your money in your pocket because you know better what to do with your money than a bureaucrat in Ottawa or a politician like myself.
Andrew Scheer.
Well, I was born in Ottawa, grew up there, spent my first 23 years of my life in Ontario, and I moved to Saskatchewan in 2003. And I might have been the only person, young person that year that moved to Saskatchewan. We had the exact same problem in Saskatchewan that you have here in the Maritimes as well. Our #1 export was our young people. And it's not rocket science. They're coming back now. They're coming back from Alberta. They're coming back from British Columbia. They're coming back from Toronto because we've lowered taxes. We've made it easier for investors to create a business and hire people. We've celebrated success, and we know that conservative policies create the prosperity that lift people out of poverty and create opportunities for the next generation. That's the recipe for success right here, and that's what I will do as Prime Minister. And I can tell you one other thing. When it comes to creating jobs in Atlantic Canada, we don't need a minister from Mississauga to tell people here how to create jobs.
Rick Peterson.
Thanks, everybody. Again, Kevin O'Leary is right, but again, he doesn't have an idea as to how to fix it. Capital is fluid, so to attract capital, let's take that corporate income tax rate to 0. Go to petersonleader.ca. Let's bring capital into the Atlantic provinces. Let's bring new investment into jobs. Let's lower your personal federal income tax rate to a flat 15%. Let's kickstart this economy. Second thing I'm going to do is my plan will balance the budget in 24 months as Prime Minister. So what that happens is right now, every family here in Atlantic Canada with 2 working parents is paying $4,200 that's going to come back into your pocket because the deficit is balanced, because the budget is balanced. It's important to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that jobs are linked to the economy. We have to attract capital, and Atlantic Canada deserves better than it's got so far. Under my plan, in 24 months, we have new capital, new jobs, and a balanced budget. petersonleader.ca. Thank you.
Pierre Lemieux.
Thank you. The Master of Ceremonies today, the first thing he spoke about when he addressed you was job losses in the region. And I have a recipe for success. The first thing is you reduce government spending. When you reduce government spending, you can then reduce taxes. When your taxes go down, you have more money in your pocket. What will you do with that money? You will spend it in the economy. Even if you're saving for that car, for that laptop, you will spend it in the economy. There's now more money in the economy, and what do businesses do? If you're a business owner, you're going to say, I'm selling a lot of laptops now. I'm going to hire someone to help me sell more. So you end up creating jobs by supporting businesses. I would also cut taxes for our businesses to encourage them to create jobs. And so that is the recipe for success. It's lower government spending, lower taxes, you will boost the economy, you will help businesses create jobs, and jobs in the region will keep your young people in the region. The Atlantic Canadians I know, they leave the region for jobs, but they can hardly wait to come back. Wouldn't it be better if they could just stay here and have jobs? Thank you.
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you. Folks, we all know governments don't create jobs. This is something the Liberals and the Dippers should understand. You know, that governments don't create. Who creates jobs? Business sectors create. Private sector creates jobs. Therefore, we need to create an environment where the private sector thrives and will create a job. So, ladies and gentlemen, my first proposal is to, as you know, I come from Alberta, and Andrew, if they come back, would be very happy to have Saskatchewan people come back. But, you know, folks, small businesses, okay? People are getting laid off. What is the best way to do it? Is start their own businesses. So let's have, I propose we get rid of the BDC, which has turned out to be a disaster, an impediment to giving loans to small businesses. We should create an institution that will give loans with lower threshold so people can go and start their own business and get employed. Thank you.
Lisa Raitt.
For 6 years, I was the president and CEO of a port and an airport in this country, and then I switched over to being a minister in 3 portfolios for 8 years. I know how government works, and I can tell you 3 things. First of all, we need to have a growth plan, not for Atlantic Canada. We need one for each and every province because we are different from one another. And you start with that with the people who are on the ground. The second thing we need is we need our kids to get training. They need to get that experience. And we have an incredibly large budget in infrastructure spend. And why don't we make the companies set up training for the kids under a certain age so that they can get those years? And I'm not just talking about skilled trades. I'm talking about back office, administration, PR, HR, all those things where people just need a couple of years to put on their resume so they get hired. And the final thing I would say is this, is that Ottawa has some great jobs. They're good jobs, they support the community, they're pillars of their community, and it may be time for those jobs to be decentralized into other parts of this great country. There's no monopoly.
Chris Alexander.
I agree that there is a legacy here of neglect of the Nova Scotia economy, of Nova Scotia's interest. No recent federal government has done enough. And it starts with accepting that there needs to be a transformation. The Ivany Report is called Now or Never. I agree, and I would implement the Ivany Report in partnership with a Jamie Bailey government and make sure that we, federally, are helping Nova Scotia grow its exports, become the platform for Canada to trade into Europe, to invest in Europe, and the platform for Europeans under free trade with that great continent to come into North America. The assets here that are already strong need to be leveraged further. Education, universities, ports, and agriculture, tourism, fisheries, advanced manufacturing, high-tech, research and development, the VC and startup community here, it all needs to be leveraged.
Aaron O'Toole.
Thank you. As somebody who got my start in politics working with the Tory party here and John Hammond in Nova Scotia, the most disappointing part of the election in 2015 was the shutout in Atlantic Canada. 32 Liberal MPs, I call them the little lambs. You know why? Because in Ottawa, it's silence of the lambs. Thousands of job losses. They wanted to take the Atlantic seat on the Supreme Court from Atlantic Canada. And what did you hear? Silence of the lambs. I'm very proud that with Gerald Keddy, myself and others, we got the European trade deal done, the South Korean trade deal. I met one of the first planes picking up seafood to go to Seoul from the Stanfield Airport. And you know why they could do that? Because we expanded the length of the runway here, building jobs for Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. I will do that as leader with a small business tax cut. I'm going to make sure we get an economic class of immigration fast-tracked to come and stay in Atlantic Canada, and we'll keep our youth at home with my Kickstart program.
Brad Drost.
Like my Conservative colleagues here, I've talked about income tax, business tax cuts I support. It's absolutely necessary to get a Conservative government here in this province. But I think part of the question is not just what general tax cuts we support, but what specific policies we have that will specifically help Atlantic Canada. Let me go through 3 of them really quickly here. You lose about half of every dollar in natural resources gets clawed back to the federal government. That's a tax that discourages you from developing your natural resources. That's got to go. Disproportionately will help this area. Your infrastructure spending needs to be more flexible. You know what it is. I've been getting an earful about how lousy telecommunications are in parts of this province and why it hurts development. Let's have more flexibility. And while defense spending should never, ever be about the economy, if we funded our defense properly in this country, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia would get a massive economic boost. That's not the reason to do it, but it would be a huge bonus.
Andrew Saxton.
Thank you. The youth unemployment rate in Canada is double the national average. At the same time, we're bringing in temporary foreign workers to fill jobs in Canada that are going unfilled. We have to do a better job of training young Canadians with the skills necessary in the marketplace, which means we need to break down that historic wall between academia and the marketplace so that people are graduating with the skills necessary in the marketplace so that they can get a job when they graduate. I lived in Switzerland for 2 years. Switzerland has an apprenticeship program. Over 80% of Swiss high school graduates, they don't go to university, they go into an apprenticeship program. And I'm not just talking about the trades. This is in banking, finance, insurance, and pharmaceuticals as well. This is what we need in Canada. As Prime Minister, I'll make sure that we have an apprenticeship program that trains young Canadians with the skills necessary in the marketplace.
Michael Chong.
Thanks, Rob. I think we have long-term challenges in our economy. Our unemployment rates around 7% remain stubbornly high, well above the U.S. rate of 4.5%. We have essentially zero per capita GDP growth in the last year. And I think it's clear that we have low levels of business investment relative to the United States, and we have income taxes that are far too high. So my view is that we need to significantly reduce both corporate and personal income tax is in this country, and I think that's particularly important in light of the tax cuts that the Trump administration will likely be introducing in the next year. I think we also need to increase financing available for small to medium-sized enterprises, and I think that starts by adopting the IMF's recommendation, which is to privatize CMHC's mortgage insurance program, which has given the banks an incentive not to loan to SMEs and instead to loan to residential mortgages. So by making these big economic changes, both on tax cuts and the privatization of the government's mortgage insurance program, we can increase business investment, increase job creation, and increase economic growth here in Atlanta.
Kelly Leach.
As I've said before, the public sector needs to shrink and the private sector needs to grow. You know, under this Liberal government, we see these huge deficits and now a carbon tax. More jobs are going to be lost, investments are going to go elsewhere. As I've mentioned, I will cap government spending. I will abolish the carbon tax, and I have a budget plan. But for here in Atlantic Canada, natural resource development is exceptionally important. And I'm going to read you a quote from Premier George Drew in Ontario from 1943. It's our humane duty to put the vast resources and rich land which God has given us into full productive use, not only for ourselves, but for the rest of the world. I have a plan to make sure that we can develop those natural resources without illegal interference, which will help create jobs here in Atlantic Canada. And I think more importantly, make sure all those young men and women that are in Western Canada, my home, come home here and make sure they grow the economy in Atlantic Canada.
Thank you. Now for a rebuttal, Rick Peterson.
Thankful to Pierre Lemieux and Michael Chong and everybody here who is in favor of my tax cut plan. They're all wanting tax cuts, and I'm saying all the way to 0 for corporate tax. Your taxes go to 15. I want to say to Jamie Bailey, I am looking forward, Jamie, to coming back here as leader because I've been approached in the last day by about 15 young people who know I'm in the venture capital business. They got ideas out here. Go to peterson.ea. My Maple Leaf account is going to put money into businesses, into startups, and we're going to help you grow the economy.
Stephen Blaney.
I want to share good news with this audience. Halifax is the fastest growing city in Canada. So it's not all black, you know, it's great. And you know why? I believe our conservative shipyard strategy has to do with it. And talking about shipyards, I can tell you I know about it because the largest Canadian shipyard is my riding. But there's another good news. We need much more icebreaker in Canada. We need much more Navy ships. And we need to break those
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you, folks. Let's talk about provincial rights now. I do understand that in this part of the world, you have to kiss a card. So when I was coming here, they said, this is the provincial Atlantic issue to kiss a card. But somebody told me now, in Halifax, you kiss what? You kiss a donaire. So I will be available to kiss a donaire. Call me in.
Chris Alexander.
Just wanted to emphasize that to break the politics of scarcity here in Nova Scotia, we need a tailored policy, a breakthrough policy with a Jamie Bailey-led government partnership to do three things. One, to make sure Nova Scotia has the most competitive or equal to the most competitive rate anywhere in tax rate anywhere in Canada, implement the Ivany report, and then make sure that Nova Scotia is at the cutting edge of Canada's push into the world, into Europe, and also into the world with a larger armed force.
Lisa Raitt.
Thank you. While I appreciate my colleagues' attempts to solve economic problems in Nova Scotia, I can tell you what the room wants. The room wants jobs because they want to keep their kids here. And I know that because I'm one of the ones that wanted to stay here. Through my infrastructure plan, every time you build something in this province, we're going to train your kids so that they can stay here. And I'm telling you, Ottawa is a bubble, a wonderfully rich economic bubble who don't remember what it's like to struggle. We have to break up the bubble and send it out to the outreaches.
This is the final question of the evening and also the final opportunity for candidates to use their rebuttals. A voice for Atlantic Canada is the final theme. Kelly Leach will be the first candidate to respond. Atlantic Canadians sent 32 Liberal MPs to Ottawa in the last election. With all our MPs and provincial premiers being Liberals, many in our region are starting to feel taken for granted. Under the Liberals, our Toronto MP is now the minister responsible for ACOA. Our voice on the Supreme Court was almost stripped away, and much needed and promised infrastructure dollars have been slow to come our way. Worse, none of our provincial governments appear ready to stand up to Ottawa. As leader of the Conservative Party, and then as Prime Minister, what specifically will you do to make sure Atlantic Canadians are fairly represented in Ottawa?
Atlantic Canada is a gateway for our nation. For so many people, for so many generations, this was their first point of contact. Atlantic Canadian values are Canadian values. Freedom, tolerance, hard work, generosity. These are the values that are enshrined in our Constitution and at the core of what it means to be Canadian. I've outlined a common sense plan that ensures that all immigrants receive an interview from a trained immigration officer. As part of that plan, they'll be asked to agree to historic values. This is a common sense plan that 2/3 of Canadians and 90% of Conservatives agree with. But I'm the only candidate at this table that supports it. It is by advocating for common sense policies that the majority of Canadians, the majority of Atlantic Canadians agree with, that we will be able to defeat Justin Trudeau in 2019 and ensure that there are Atlantic Canadian MPs with a voice at the table.
Michael Chong.
Well, thanks, Rob. This is a great province. I've spent many times over the years here in this province. Believe it or not, I've camped out at Meat Cove. My tent almost blew away. I've spent an afternoon at the bar in Shetty Camp dancing to fiddle music. I've been in the Annapolis Valley and seen the blueberries and apples that go for export to South America. It's a great province. But I believe that one of the challenges that this province has in Ottawa is that their MPs aren't heard around the table. And so we need to change our system by giving more power back to elected members of Parliament and to the grassroots members of political parties. You know, we've had 32 MPs here from the Atlantic Canadian region, and in the last year, not one of them spoke up about the proposed plan not to appoint a judge from Atlantic Canada. Not one of them has spoken up about the government's decision this week to cancel its plans for electoral reform. Under my 10-point plan for democratic reform, this province and its MPs will have a real voice at the table.
Andrew Saxton.
Thank you. I also come from a coastal province, British Columbia, and we have the same issues facing us that you have facing you as well. We're a coastal playground. We want to protect our coastline. But at the same time, we also realize that to create jobs, we need to get our products to Tidewater. Energy East is one of those projects that makes sense. There's no safer way to transport oil than in a pipe in the ground that comes to the East Coast. That will take our reliance off of Middle Eastern oil entirely. Why should we be buying oil from the Middle East in Eastern Canada when we've got more than enough oil coming from the West? That is a very important project. The Maritime Link is another project that I would look at fast-tracking as well. It's really important that we create jobs here, and the free trade agreement with the European Union is another opportunity for maritimers to get jobs, because all those Canadian products are going to be shipped through your ports. And as Prime Minister, I will make sure that your ports are buzzing again with activity.
Brad Trost.
The question is about a voice for Atlantic Canada. And I don't think the next leader of the Conservative Party needs to wait till he's Prime Minister. Ottawa doesn't know best. That's not just true for the country, that's true for the party. And as much as I loved the last 10 years that we were in government, sometimes that was a little bit of the problem. On party affairs, on things internally, on selection of candidates, on various things, Ottawa knew best. The same thing needs to go when I am Prime Minister of Canada. The Prime Minister is first among equals. He needs to be able to delegate regional decisions to his regional ministers, who should actually have portfolios that fit their region. You need to listen to the Scott Armstrongs and the Rob Moores. They need to have authority to make decisions for their region when they get back in Parliament. Not all decisions can or should be made by the Prime Minister. He needs to listen to his caucus.
Aaron O'Toole.
Well, who's going to be a voice? It's who has been a voice for Atlantic Canada. I'm very proud to have studied here, served in the military here, and when I left, I took a part of this place in my heart. I worked to support military family resource centers through the True Patriot Love Center in Greenwood here in Halifax. I started the Alexander Keith Sociable in Toronto and raised money for the IWK from Maritimers transplanted working in Toronto. I've been fighting on Atlantic Canada issues consistently as an MP, often with my friend Lisa, particularly on the Supreme Court of Canada, to make sure you have a voice. Now, when, as I said, there's the silence of the 32 lambs in Ottawa. So as your leader, I have said the rebuilding of our party and the win in 2019 starts in Atlantic Canada, and I will be here in the Legion Halls, the church basements, fighting with you to win some of the great seats back, including you, Rob.
Chris Alexander.
I've also spent summers here on Cape Breton Island. I was proud to be here often as Peter MacKay's Parliamentary Secretary for National Defence, and to see that spark plug of the shipbuilding program start to do its work for the economy of Atlantic Canada. But we need much more, and it's not enough just to have a voice, strong voices. We will have them in Ottawa again. We need a vision for what is going to transform this economy. It's been since Confederation that our economy has become more and more oriented north-south, continentally. It's benefited the two big provinces in the center. We've had a bit of growth in energy in the west. It's time we turned ourselves outwards and seized the opportunity of free trade with Europe, seized the opportunity of free trade agreements with Asia, and build those energy bridges that are going to help keep Europe free, that are going to help reduce dependence of Europe on Vladimir Putin, that are going to create a new generation of jobs here in high.
Lisa Raitt.
Thank you very much. In order to have a strong Atlantic voice, we need to return strong Atlantic MPs, and we have to earn back the trust of the voter. Simply put, for everyone who knocked doors, you know what that's all about. And what do I know what I say about Atlantic Canada? This is what I would say to the voters. Atlantic Canada is a founding part of our country. It is a caring part of our country. We have gone through wars, we have gone through disasters, we have gone through neglect. And when we run out of resources and manufactured goods to send to the other parts of the world, we educate and send our most precious resource. We send our children. We deserve a voice. We have earned that voice. And I will listen to that voice. We will get these votes back. And I will make sure that we grow together, because at the end of the day, Atlantic Canadians have consistently punched above their weight, and they're an incredibly important part of our wonderful country.
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you. Let me remind everyone, all Conservative MPs are your voice. Even if we come from different part of the world, different part of the country, we stand up for what is right, and in this case, rights also for Canadian Atlantic provinces. But let me also say one thing. It is very important that we respect provincial rights. One of our colleagues here says he will not respect provincial rights. But if we make the province governments very strong, they can stand up at the times when there are no for their own rights in this province for Atlantic Canada. So let's ensure ensure, we are standing here today at the PC convention, let's ensure that the provinces have provincial conservative governments that can stand up for you and fight for your rights in the national capital. Thank you.
Pierre Lemieux.
Thank you. I think for Atlantic Canadians to have a stronger voice in Ottawa, you need to have more elected MPs on the Conservative side in Ottawa. And how do you do that? You win the confidence of Atlantic Canadians, and I'm convinced that the recipe of success is the one that I outlined just previously, by putting in place a strong, healthy economy that creates jobs. I think Atlantic Canadians want good-paying jobs in the region so they can stay in Atlantic Canada and raise their families. And that type of winning formula will lead to a Conservative win in many, many ridings, which will increase your presence and your voice in Ottawa. I also think that the federal government can change the way in which it does some business. In other words, in this technological age, it is possible for many people to work remotely or from satellite offices that might be located in the region. So that Atlantic Canadians do not need to go to Ottawa to work in a government job. They can work remotely or attached to satellite government offices in the region. So I would see the government changing the way in which it works in order to help you prosper here in Atlantic Canada.
Rick Peterson.
Rob, this is the most important question of the night, and it feels so good to come home. I'm a Peter Lougheed progressive conservative. 1971, I signed my progressive conservative leadership. In 2003, I supported a progressive conservative named Peter MacKay. I supported Peter. He was the first person that I called last summer when I was looking at coming into this race. Our party needs more progressive conservative voices under my leadership. The progressive element of this party, which has been too quiet, which has not been strong enough, will regain vigor. The second thing we need to do is we need to beat Justin Trudeau. To beat Justin Trudeau, you need a plan. You've heard about my plan. Lower taxes, balance the budget, create jobs. Second thing, c'est qu'il faut parler français. Il faut souvent parler aux Acadiens ou tous les francophones et les francophiles à travers le Canada. Grassroots support. I've been on campaigns for the last 30 years, and I hope you'll...
Andrew Scheer.
Well, it's been very frustrating to see the reward for Atlantic Canada for voting Liberal en masse and how you've been treated by this Liberal government. But it should be no surprise. It happens every time there's a Trudeau in office. It's the same Ottawa knows best, centralizing, big government approach that the Liberals are famous for. That's what we need to do to change to make sure that Atlantic Canada has a strong voice. It's not just about, although it's important, it's very important, the Supreme Court position. It's also Energy East. Watching all 32 Liberal MPs voting against Energy East was one of the most frustrating days in the House of Commons. It's the moratorium on coal that was slapped down on this province without any consultation. That's the type of thing that we as Conservatives will fight. We need your support to win back those seats in 2019.
Maxime Bernier.
I want to be your voice. I want to be the voice for Atlantic Canada, but also the voice for all Canadians. I want to help you to develop your economy, and I think the best way to do that is for having a real free trade in Canada. It is a shame that after 150 years in this country that we don't have an economic union. That was the condition for creating this country. We must have free trade. The cost for you is too huge because you're a small market. If you're not able to sell your goods to other provinces and outside this country, you won't be able to create wealth and job in this country. So if we have real free trade, we can increase the growth of the GDP here in Atlantic Canada by 2 and 3%. So we can do that together, and I have a plan for being sure that we'll have a real free trade, and this country will have an economic union after 150 years.
Stephen Blaney.
There were 0 Conservative members in Quebec in 2006. 0. What did we say? We said that we would do what we say and say what we do. We said that we would put money back in the pocket of the people. And we got re-elected 4 times, actually. Actually, we have a pretty good region for Conservative, Maxim. Why? Because we have farmers, we have people who trust us. It's all about trust. And I've been privileged to work with colleagues like Rob Moore, with Miss Leolie O'Gordon, with Loyal Ahern, with Robert Gauguin, where I was at the shooting in Moncton, unfortunately. Great. The Atlantic is part of Canada, and it needs to be part of our next government. It needs to be taken into account, and that's how we're going to win back the heart of Atlantic, by being true to ourselves. Thank you.
Kevin O'Leary.
You know, Atlantic Canada represents a huge opportunity for the Conservative Party. Most of us can trace our DNA, our early heritage, back to a pier just a few hundred yards from here. My father, Terry O'Leary, came here in the 40s. My mother, Georgette Bukalam, and her family, Lebanese immigrants. I look at this fantastic opportunity this way. You have to appeal to the people. It'll be a personal failure for me if I can't turn every Lebanese immigrant in Atlantic Canada into a card-carrying Conservative. They make great food, and they're great entrepreneurs. And if you're Irish, you're mine. We're going to go together here, back to Ottawa. But this is a huge opportunity. Remember, we have to build this party back to what Harper had on his first majority mandate, 300,000 members. We're under 100 now. I've got to expand the base big time. Everybody counts. This is a huge opportunity right here in Atlantic Canada.
Now we'll move to the rebuttal phase. Andrew Saxton.
Thank you. I'm going to turn every Hungarian immigrant into a card-carrying Conservative. and every United Empire loyalist as well. The economy, folks, is going to be the #1 issue in the next election because this Trudeau government is the most economically inept since the last Trudeau government. I'm the only candidate on this stage who has got experience, significant experience in finance, both in the private sector and in government. I worked with Jim Flaherty as his parliamentary secretary. I was part of the finance team that balanced the budget. I will do it again. AndrewSaxton.ca.
Kevin O'Leary.
Nowhere on your passport or in the Canadian Constitution does it say you have to tolerate mediocrity in government and incompetence. This is all about to change. The body politic in Canada is no different than anywhere else around the world. People are sick of politicians spinning them BS. That time is over, my friends. That's why I'm in this race. We're going to change it all.
Andrew Scheer.
Well, you know, Mr. O'Leary just talked about expanding our base and building up our membership. But at the same time, he says that he's not going to seek a seat right away in the House of Commons. He's not going to give this project his full attention. He's going to keep his other job and continue to travel around the world. Beating Justin Trudeau in 2019 is a full-time job. It requires a full-time commitment.
Stephen Blaney.
Kevin, it's great to have you here tonight, and you've been the target of many attacks, but frankly, we missed you in Quebec. And you said that to win over Justin Trudeau, you have to show courage. Well, Deepak showed courage, and now he has more fans than you do in Quebec. Canadian and Conservative deserves to have a leader that has courage. Thank you.
Lisa Raitt.
After the Halifax explosion, Nova Scotians expressed their gratitude to the folks in the United States by sending them a Christmas tree every year. And this year, of course, the Christmas tree came from Cape Breton. It was great. I just never expected that Boston in return would send us a candidate for the leadership.
Michael Chong.
Well, Mr. O'Leary, you said you want to grow our party, but you've shown a remarkable lack of judgment. Earlier this week, you posted a horrific videotape of yourself firing a machine gun in Miami on the very same day that we were burying the dead from the Quebec City attacks last weekend. This is not the judgment of somebody who should be leader of the Conservative Party or Prime Minister of Canada.
Kevin O'Leary.
Here's what it takes to win a majority mandate. That's the only way we can turn the country around. While my fellow politicians here are sitting in Ottawa, I am going to go from college to college to college and win back every single voter that Trudeau took away from us. He got 82% of that young vote. Now, luckily, I have a wicked competitive advantage. They all know me as an entrepreneur. Yes, that's the benefit of television. But when I show up to teach at Dalhousie, I'll get 60% of those kids to vote for us. Then I'll do it in every other city.
Well, that was the last of our questions. Thank you to all of the federal leadership candidates for sharing their responses. It's clear that no matter which candidate is leader after May 27th, the Conservative Party of Canada will be in very good hands. We will now begin the 90-second closing statements with Lisa Raitt.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much, Nova Scotia. It's been great to be here, and you've been wonderful. So give yourself a round of applause, but don't cut too much into my time. Thank you. Let's review the record of the Liberals, because I think this is important. They said they would promise to run a $10 billion deficit. They didn't do that. They said that they would balance a budget by 2019. It's 2055 now. They said that they would reinstate mail home delivery. Not going to happen. They said that they would cut small business taxes. Left that one behind. They said that they would hold an open competition on competing for our CF-18s. We know that one's gone as well. He also said that there would be revenue-neutral tax cuts, cost over $1 billion. And finally, the fait accompli this week, they promised that this election would be the last one first past the post, and guess what? They reneged on that one again. Trudeau is not a man of his word. What I can tell you is this: when we run against him in 2019, you want to put up as a leader somebody you can trust and that you know knows you. He doesn't know us. He's never had to worry about a job. He's never had to worry about his kids getting a job. He's never had to worry about a down payment for a house. These are real things that occupy our mind and our time and cause us to lose sleep. I am the best leader for this Conservative Party because every single time when I stand there, I remind him exactly who he isn't. He is not one of us. He is not one of you. And he definitely doesn't think about you when he makes decisions.
Chris Alexander.
Well, I agree with that. Every word of it. And I, too, would like to thank all of you and Nova Scotia for this hospitality that we've had. And I'd also like to pay tribute to all of the other candidates, all of my colleagues up here on this stage, for being part of an exciting, broad-based race. What other party, national party, in a G7 country brings this much talent to the table? It is a sign of our strength. It is a sign that we have vision. It is a sign that we are the future of this country and of Nova Scotia. But we live in an uncertain world. There is economic anxiety. We see it when we talk to young people. We see it in our own families. We see it in communities that are worrying about the future, that are worrying about where the next jobs will come from, where their jobs might go. We, as a new Conservative government, have one central responsibility in 2019, and that is to be the source of a new vision for Canada of job creation that reflects the opportunities of the new economy, that reflects the opportunities of trade and of innovation and of research-driven exports that we in Canada now understand best in a world that is otherwise beset with protectionism and darkness. Let's be that model.
Maxime Bernier.
We were not on the Dragon Dance stage tonight. You are not applying to work for us. We are applying to work for you. And that's what I want to do. I want to work for you. I want to work for my daughters, Charlotte and Megan, for your children, your grandchildren, because what the Trudeau government is doing right now, it is not fair for the future generation. We don't have a future. It's a big black hole. So we need to give opportunities to Canadians. We need to have a smaller government because We have faith in people. We have faith in people. We have faith in your ability to take your decision, to do what you want to do in life, and to decide your own destiny. We don't believe that a big fat government in Ottawa is the solution to every problem in a society. I believe that it's you, that you're having the solution, and we must be sure that you'll have all the tools to be able to achieve your dreams. And I want to be with you. And I want to be also with my colleagues here on the stage. We'll be a great team, and together, yes, we'll be able to be back in government, and we'll be able to bring more jobs and opportunities in Canada. Merci.
Kelly Leach.
To beat Trudeau, our party has to do three things: talk common sense policies, organize, and make sure we have effective communications. Common sense ideas like screening immigrants for Canadian values, making sure women are empowered with pepper spray so they can defend themselves, making sure that we are building that common sense movement so that Canadians join us. And I can tell you that we're going to take a lot of heat for these ideas and things that we do. But when 2/3 of Canadians agree with you, you have an opportunity to break through. What I can tell you is that if we are unafraid, we are going to win.
Stephen Blaney.
Okay. Fellow Canadian, the countdown for Vimy 100 has begun. The battle that took place on April the 9th, 1917, where we will commemorate the birth of a nation, a defining moment, but equally the loss of 3,000 Canadians. This week, in Quebec City, we lost 6 Canadians over a heinous crime. Boufelja Ben Abdallah, co-founder of the Quebec City Islamic Cultural Center, said, "We must continue to live better together. For the millenniums, the next generation, for a real sustainable development and living together, for our own humanity, we must take up our quarrel with the foe and have the courage to reach out to answer yes to this call for action because we are Canadian." Merci.
Brad Trost.
Tonight, I did not criticize my fellow Conservative candidates because they all have good ideas, and I believe I can work with each and every one of them. And I can work with each and every one of them because I'm 100% through and through Conservative. I'm known as a social conservative, someone who believes in the value, the sanctity of human life from conception to natural death. People know I've fought things like C-16, often known as the bathroom bill. I've stood up for the rights of firearms owners, and I think we need to finish the job and repeal the final elements of Bill C-68. I'm a fiscal conservative, lower taxes, less red tape, cutting government waste, privatizing things like the CBC, all things we need to do. And I'm a democratic conservative. I understand that as leader of this party, as Prime Minister of Canada, I don't have all the answers. I need a good team. I need a strong team from C to C. The Liberals are going to be very tough to beat. We know that. We need everyone on this stage together to fight them. But we owe it to Canadians to defeat the government of Justin Trudeau. They are destroying our country, and we need to stand up for our fellow Canadians. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. Merci, and may God bless each and every one of you.
Rick Peterson.
I was in Quebec City yesterday afternoon, standing with 4,000 other Canadians in the Quebec City Convention Centre. And I heard words of passion, I heard words of tolerance, I heard words of love. I heard words like, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam. I heard words like, Allah Akbar. And I was reminded by Catholics, Jews, Muslims, agnostics, what a deeply rich country we have. In front of us were 3 dead men, Azzedine Soufiane, Mamadou Medberi, Ibrahim Aberi. Fathers, all of them. Entrepreneurs, all of them. Small businessmen, all of them. Owner of a grocer and a butcher. a cosmetic technician, and an IT technician. As I listened to the speeches, I thought of you here as Conservatives because the values that I heard in the Convention Centre of Quebec City yesterday are Conservative values. Our party must work hard to make sure that we are the party. Donc les valeurs des Canadiens, les valeurs des Français, les valeurs des Québécois, ce sont les nôtres, and that our party is the party that stands up and defends a system of immigration and justice that welcomes the world and makes us all better. Thank you.
Andrew Saxton.
Friends, I'm running for leader of our party and Prime Minister of Canada because I believe that Canada is a place that's known, where it doesn't matter where you come from or what you do or what your name is. If you work hard and persevere, you can achieve security, financial security for you and your family, and create opportunities for your children. I know somebody that came to Canada as an orphan at the age of 17 from war-torn Europe. He had nothing except the desire to succeed in his new home. At the age of 20, he started a new business, and he got his friends to invest in that business. And over the next 15 years, he and his partners grew that business into the third largest finance company in Canada, with over 2,000 employees and over 200 branches from coast to coast. That person was my father, and he taught me a great deal about the importance of hard work. I'm sure many of you in this audience also have stories of people who started with nothing and created their dream here in Canada. As Prime Minister of Canada, I will ask my government every day, what are we doing to help Canadians achieve their dreams? Thank you.
Aaron O'Toole.
When I talk each summer to my children, Molly and Jack, 10 and 5, about the summer and going to Nova Scotia as we do, they say, when are we going home? Because that really is our home here. I served in the military. I look around this city where I went to law school, at St. Mary's, where I married my wife, Rebecca, and I'm so proud to have her here. I was part of you. I was a volunteer at these conventions and helped John Hamm win in 1999, served on the provincial executive with many of you as volunteers. My entire campaign team is full of Nova Scotians, like in the past with Stanfield and Mulrooney, tapping that talent. And so I need you to join my team to make sure we can win. We have a Prime Minister who has an economy out of control, taxes raising for everyone, the military already atrophying, a decade of darkness, while he's flying to private islands. We have a celebrity-in-chief. We don't beat the celebrity-in-chief with another celebrity-in-chief. You know, Robert Stanfield and John Hamm did not have to go on television to earn the right to lead. They led by example here in Nova Scotia. That's why I'm running a positive ideas-based campaign. And let's not kid ourselves, friends. Particularly in Atlantic Canada, we lost not because of our shipbuilding and the great work we did. We were perceived to have a mean-spirited or negative edge. I've said I want to take that out, rebuild this party. So let's not seek out a leader that is known for mean-spirit and negative edge. I need your help to make sure we can win in 20.
Michael Chong.
Thanks, Rob, for moderating this event, and thank you all for coming out to listen to us tonight. We as Conservatives need to get serious. You know, it feels good to scratch an itch, but it's not always good for you. And this race is whether or not we grow our party or whether we scratch an itch. This race is a clear choice between two very different visions of the Conservative Party. On the one hand, there are plenty of candidates who want to scratch an itch. We have a candidate who thinks he's Rambo, who videotaped himself letting loose on a machine gun in Miami, and then had the audacity to post that video on the very same day we were burying the victims of one of the worst mass shootings in Canadian history. That might scratch an itch, but that video will cost us the next election. We have another candidate who is proposing to scrap the Canada Health Act and get the federal government out of one of Canadians' most cherished social programs, public health care. That too might scratch an itch, but that is a recipe for losing. And we have candidates in this race who cannot speak French to the 25% of Canadians who speak French as their first language, comme des francophones qui habitent à Sherbrooke, en Acadie et partout les Maritimes. And we have candidates that are playing to fear and prejudice about immigrants and refugees. My vision is for a very different party, a much bigger party, a much more inclusive party. Join my campaign.
Kevin O'Leary.
Thank you. The last election, I stood in line on Bloor Street with my son, who's 20 years old, and was going into the polling booth, and I said to him, Trevor, you know, we're a conservative family. You're gonna vote conservative, right? He said, I don't think so, Dad. I've seen a different direction. For people my age, I'm going a different way. And I said, you must be kidding. If you want to come home, you're going to change your mind about that. Both my daughter and son voted for Trudeau. That's a fact. Now, I have a very high bar, and everybody else in this room does too. We need to win them all back, all of them. Our party has to be their future. That is the whole point of this. The task is, who can get these people back on side with us, number one. We have to expand our base materially. We've got to be at least 60% of their choice has to be conservative, or we cannot win a majority mandate. Number two, I'm going to spend the next 2 years shining the light of transparency on Trudeau. I can read a balance sheet. I can read an income statement. When I saw he wanted to run deficits for 38 years, leaving my children in debt, $1.5 trillion, that's it. There's not a chance in hell he's going to do that. Because I'm going to scrape him out of there. That's what's going to happen.
And you have been watching the Conservative leadership debate from the Western Nova Scotia and Halifax. Our window is closing. For those who want to continue watching, you can do so on our website, CBCNews.ca. But do stay with us. Up next, an update on your headlines and a special edition of the Fifth Estate and their investigation into the Quebec shootings of last weekend. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Speak about what's important to us without intimidation, without being labeled with a phobia of some kind, and without being intimidated by the Human Rights Commissions. So these are the types of principles that I think are meaningful to us as Conservatives. And lastly, I think Canadians want someone who understands service, and I served in the military from the age of 17 for 20 years.
Andrew Scheer.
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. You know, I thought we had great political conventions in Saskatchewan, but I got to tell you, Nova Scotia, you just raised the bar. When I get asked why I'm running for the leadership of the party, my answer is very simple. I can't let Justin Trudeau do to my 5 children the same thing that his father did to my generation. When you think about the billions of dollars that the Trudeau Liberals are racking up, he is reaching into the future and stealing our children's prosperity. But, you know, we're all conservatives up on this stage. Almost all of us are conservatives on the stage. And so we're all going to agree on how to do that. We're all going to agree on balancing the budget. We're all going to agree on cutting taxes. But what we need is a leader who can articulate a positive message for the future, a positive message for our country and for our party. We need to change the way we talk to people. Liberals should not have a monopoly on compassion. There is nothing compassionate about Liberal policies that keep people trapped on cycles of dependency or that kill jobs and kill opportunities for young people. I know I can bring our message to a broader audience of Canadians. It's not just about who can ridicule Justin Trudeau the loudest. It's who can convince Canadians to put their trust in us in 2019. And I'd be honored if you chose me to be your leader. Thank you.
Deepak O'Brien.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in 20 years of my experience, I know what works and what doesn't work. As the longest serving member of parliament in the Conservative caucus, I have worked with all these fine gentlemen and ladies, excuse me, and you know, they are really an excellent Conservatives, and what you heard today was excellent ideas. This would be the team that will defeat Justin Trudeau. Not one individual, but the team that will defeat Justin Trudeau, because this is the team that's coming forward with ideas, what people want, what Canadians want. This is the team that will make this Conservative Party the party of the future, not the party of the past. That's where we have to go. We do not need making noises, but we need policies that are core Conservative principle policies that has worked in the past, and ladies and gentlemen, that will work in the future as well. So let's keep to working with this team, and ladies and gentlemen, if you want more information, dpackage.com. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the debate. A big round of applause, a big thank you to all the leadership candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, a special thank you to Jamie Bailey, the next Premier of Nova Scotia, and all the organizers behind this convention and this debate at the Progressive Conservative Party of Nova Scotia. Please stand by. The next Chase the Ace draw will take place at any minute. Good night. Enjoy tonight's hospitality suites and the rest of the convention. Hey, you guys were
I don't
great.
think there was that many hiccups, so
I think it wasn't any
I
that
think that worked really well.
Really?
Great job.
Yeah, did very well.
Now I can like relax my shoulders.
Have a drink. Yeah.
Have a drink.
Yeah.
It was really great to work with you, Rob.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Great job.
Great to meet you.
Okay.
Am I in that line? Am I in the cabinet position?